I still remember the day I left. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting an orange glow over the quiet streets of our small town. It was the last morning I'd wake up next to Emily before shipping off to war. She lay there, still asleep, her blonde hair spilling across the pillow, her breath steady and peaceful. I wanted to wake her, to hold her one last time, but I let her sleep. Maybe I was afraid of seeing the pain in her eyes, or maybe I just wanted to remember her like that, calm, beautiful, untouched by the chaos waiting for me overseas. The knock on the door came sharp and precise. My ride had arrived. I grabbed my duffel bag, took one last look at our apartment, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, the kind that fills your lungs with something close to hope. Emily had promised to wait for me. She had kissed me the night before, whispered, "No matter how long you're gone, I'll be here." I held on to those words like a lifeline. Deployment was brutal. The desert was a furnace by day and ice by night. The sounds of gunfire, the weight of my rifle, the faces of my brothers in arms, it became my world. I wrote to Emily whenever I could. Letters filled with love, longing, and plans for the future. She wrote back, but over time, her letters became shorter, less frequent. I told myself it was nothing. She was just busy. Life at home continued while mine stood frozen in war. But I never imagined what waited for me when I returned. The flight home felt unreal. After months of sandstorms, firefights, and sleepless nights, I was finally heading back. I imagined stepping through the door, dropping my duffel bag, and pulling Emily into my arms. I thought about the way she'd look at me, eyes full of love, relief, and maybe even tears. When the plane touched down, my hands shook. I blamed the adrenaline, the exhaustion, maybe even the memories I was bringing home with me. But deep down, something felt off. I tried to push it aside. I was just nervous. It had been too long. The drive back to our apartment felt like a dream, everything familiar yet strangely distant. I noticed little changes, new stores on the corners, different cars parked along the street. Time had moved forward, even when mine had stood still. I tightened my grip on my bag. I was ready to be home. Climbing the stairs to our apartment, my heart pounded. I reached the door, took a deep breath, and turned the knob. Unlocked. That was odd. Emily was always careful. I stepped inside. At first, nothing seemed out of place. The living room was tidy, the scent of her favorite candles lingering in the air. But then I heard it. A laugh. A deep, masculine laugh coming from our bedroom. My stomach dropped. My pulse roared in my ears. I took slow, deliberate steps down the hall, toward the sound that would change everything. And then, I saw him. He was standing by the bed, our bed, shirtless, laughing as if he belonged there. Emily sat next to him, wrapped in nothing but a sheet, her face flushed, her hair tousled in a way I had once called beautiful. For a moment, the world went silent. I felt detached, as if I were watching a scene from someone else's life. My hands tightened into fists, my breath came in sharp, controlled bursts. I wanted to believe this wasn't real, that maybe I had walked into the wrong apartment. But I knew better. The pictures on the walls, the scent of her perfume, this was my home. And she wasn't alone. Emily's eyes widened when she saw me. She gasped, pulling the sheet tighter around her, scrambling as if she could somehow undo what I had just witnessed. "Michael!" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The man, tall, built, a little younger than me, turned, his expression shifting from surprise to something closer to annoyance. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look scared. He just stood there, studying me like I was an unexpected inconvenience. I dropped my duffel bag. The heavy thud echoed in the room. My mind screamed at me to react, to yell, to swing, to demand an explanation, but I stood frozen, my body caught between rage and disbelief. "Who the hell is this?" the man asked casually, glancing at Emily. And that was when something inside me snapped. My blood turned to fire. Every muscle in my body tensed, my hands shaking with barely contained fury. I had been gone for over a year, surviving in hell, fighting for my life, And this was what I came home to. This? Emily didn't answer him right away. She looked at me, eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt? Fear? Or worse, indifference. I took a step forward, my boots heavy against the floor. The man squared his shoulders, his confidence infuriating. He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. I'll ask you one more time, I said, my voice low, steady, dangerous. Who the hell are you? He smirked, like I was some kind of joke to him. I could ask you the same thing, man. That was it. My fist connected with his jaw before I even realized I had moved. The crack of impact was satisfying, sending him stumbling back into the nightstand, knocking over the lamp. He groaned, clutching his face, but I wasn't done. Months of war, of loss, of longing for a woman who clearly didn't give a damn. I unleashed all of it in that moment. Emily screamed, jumping out of bed, trying to pull me away. Michael, stop! Please! But I didn't stop. Not yet. The bastard swung at me, but he was too slow. I ducked, grabbed him by the collar, and slammed him against the wall. His eyes, wide with shock, finally held something new, fear. And then Emily said something that made my world shatter all over again. Michael! I can explain. I let go of him, my breath ragged, my heart hammering against my ribs. My hands were still clenched, ready to strike again, but her voice cut through the haze of rage. I can explain. I turned to Emily, my eyes burning into hers. Then do it, I growled. Explain how I come home from war to find you in bed with some stranger. Explain how the woman who swore she'd wait for me threw it all away. She swallowed hard, pulling the sheet tighter around her as if it could shield her from the truth. Michael, She hesitated, glancing at the man, who was still rubbing his jaw, glaring at me. I didn't think you were coming back. The words hit me like a bullet to the chest. You didn't. I took a step back, shaking my head in disbelief. You didn't think I was coming back? What the hell does that even mean, Emily? She shifted uncomfortably, refusing to meet my eyes. You stopped writing. I froze. What? I didn't hear from you for months, she said, her voice breaking. At first I waited. I told myself you were just busy, that you'd write when you could. But then, nothing. No letters. No calls. I thought. She stopped, exhaling sharply. I thought you were dead, Michael. Dead. I stared at her, my mind spinning. That wasn't true. I wrote to her every chance I got. I poured my heart into those letters. I told her I loved her, that I was fighting to come home to her. I narrowed my eyes. That's a damn lie, Emily. I wrote. I wrote every week. She went pale. Then, why didn't I get them? And that's when it hit me. Something wasn't right. Her face twisted in confusion, but I wasn't buying it. I knew I wrote those letters. I sent them, sealed with every ounce of love I had left after the hell I endured overseas. So where the hell did they go? You're telling me you didn't get a single one? I asked, my voice sharp, controlled. She shook her head. Not one, Michael. I studied her, searching for deception, but she looked genuinely lost. That didn't make sense. Someone had to have intercepted them. But who? And why? Then it hit me. Your sister, I muttered under my breath. Emily's eyes widened. What? Melissa, I said louder this time. She always hated me, didn't she? Thought I wasn't good enough for you. She knew I was writing, didn't she? Emily blinked rapidly, her lips parting like she wanted to protest, but she hesitated. That was all the confirmation I needed. Oh my God! She whispered, the color draining from her face. She was staying with me for months after you left. She helped me go through the mail. Her voice cracked. She wouldn't. But she knew. And so did I. Melissa had made sure Emily never got my letters. She had poisoned her mind, convinced her I was gone, while I was thousands of miles away, fighting for my life and dreaming of coming home to her. The rage that had simmered inside me reignited. Not just at Melissa, but at Emily too. Because even without those letters, she should have waited. Instead, she let another man take my place. And I wasn't sure I could ever forgive her for that. Emily sank onto the bed, her hands trembling as she covered her mouth. "Oh my God!" she kept whispering, as if saying it enough times would change what had already happened. I just stood there, staring at her. At the woman I had once loved more than anything. The woman I had fought for, dreamed about, lived for while I was surrounded by death. And now? Now she looked like a stranger to me. She finally looked up, her eyes desperate. "Michael, I swear, if I had known." "But you didn't," I cut in, my voice hollow. "You didn't know because you didn't even try. You let her tell you I was gone, and you believed it." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. I had seen real suffering. I had watched men die in my arms, had written letters home to their families because they never got the chance to. And here she was, crying over a choice she made. A choice that broke everything. The other man, her man, finally spoke up. "Look, dude, I don't know what kind of drama this is, but you need to leave." I turned to him slowly, my jaw tightening. "This is my home." He scoffed. "Not anymore." Emily gasped. "Jason, stop." But it was too late. I stepped forward, close enough that he could see the kind of war still raging in my eyes. "You have 5 seconds to get out before I make you wish you never met her." He hesitated, then grabbed his shirt and shoes, muttering curses under his breath as he brushed past me. He knew. He saw it in me, the violence, the restraint barely holding me together. He wasn't stupid enough to push it further. The door slammed behind him. And then it was just me and Emily. The silence between us was suffocating. "What now?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't staying. I exhaled sharply, my chest heavy with something I couldn't even name. Grief? Rage? Betrayal? Maybe all of it. Maybe more. Emily sat on the bed, hugging the sheet around herself like it could shield her from the wreckage she had created. "Michael," she whispered, her voice barely holding together. I shook my head. "Don't." She flinched. I could feel her wanting to beg, wanting to reach for some kind of redemption. But there was nothing left to save. I turned away from her, my eyes scanning the apartment, our apartment. The framed pictures of us still hung on the walls, reminders of a life that had died long before I even stepped through the door. A jacket of mine was still draped over the couch, just where I had left it the day I deployed. A painful illusion of permanence in a place where I had already been erased. I picked up my duffel bag, the same one I had carried through the sand and blood of war, the same one I had imagined dropping on this very floor before pulling Emily into my arms. But that homecoming would never happen. She was crying now. "I swear if I had known." "But you didn't," I said, my voice sharp, cutting through her excuses. "You didn't wait, Emily. You didn't even fight for me." She let out a broken sob, but I didn't turn around. I walked to the door, gripping the handle. For a moment, I hesitated. Maybe in another world, another life, this could have gone differently. Maybe if she had waited. Maybe if she had believed in me. But in this world, in this life, it was already over. I opened the door and stepped out, never looking back. The cold night air hit me as I stepped outside, but it didn't clear my head. My chest still burned, my fist still ached from where I had hit him. I walked down the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. I had dreamed of this moment, of coming home, of wrapping Emily in my arms, of feeling whole again. But instead, I was walking away from everything I thought I had. My truck was still parked where I had left it before deployment, covered in dust like a relic of another life. I tossed my duffel bag in the back seat and slid behind the wheel. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. Where the hell was I supposed to go now? I had no home. No family waiting for me. Emily had been my future, my anchor. And now? Now she was just another scar. I turned the key, the engine growling to life. My mind raced with everything that had just happened. The missing letters. Melissa's betrayal. Emily's choices. That bastard in my bed. I could go confront Melissa, demand answers. I could turn back, scream at Emily until my voice gave out. But none of that would change the truth. I was alone. So I drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to move, to put distance between me and the ruins of my life. The road stretched ahead, endless and empty, just like the future I never thought I'd have to rebuild. And for the first time since I got home, I finally let myself feel it. The loss. The heartbreak. And the quiet, suffocating weight of a war that hadn't ended just because I made it home. The road blurred under the glow of the headlights, my grip tight on the wheel. I didn't know where I was going, just that I had to get the hell away. Away from the betrayal. Away from the home that wasn't mine anymore. Away from her. But no matter how far I drove, I couldn't outrun the truth. I had survived war. I had faced death, seen things that would haunt me forever. And yet this felt like the deepest wound of all. I pulled off the highway into a gas station, staring blankly at the neon sign flickering above. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, the weight of 1,000 battles hanging on my shoulders. Emily had been my reason to come home. My reason to fight. And now, she was just another ghost. I leaned against the truck, exhaling sharply. I could feel the anger simmering beneath the heartbreak, the raw edge of betrayal threatening to swallow me whole. But what good would rage do? I couldn't change what had happened. I couldn't go back in time and make her wait. I could only move forward. Where? I didn't know. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't the same man who left for war. And I sure as hell wasn't going to be the man who let this break him. So I climbed back into the truck, set my jaw, and drove toward whatever came next. Because the past was dead. And it was time to start fighting for myself.